let's talk a little bit about what you recently put up on your Substack the other day, the idea of the quote unquote modern liberator that's sort of hinted at towards the end of Faction, the original Faction. Um, so would you like to kind of give an overview of what that is, kind of in universe, and then maybe what some concepts for it would look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm I'm going to be putting together a Substack article on the topic because I'm writing I'm writing articles about the Guns of Faction that explain some of the like very simple modifications that they have, which is all real world stuff that can be done. But the concept of the modern liberator is something that is achievable now, and I envisioned it through the through the through the screen of the character Joe Shea, who's this espionage oriented guy who's been around for a long time, and he knows a lot of the old ways of doing these things and what has been tried in the past. So the highest level thing is like, okay, what is the Liberator? The Liberator was a stamped sheet metal 45 caliber single shot pistol that was manufactured. Like a million of them were manufactured, and they were airdropped to like resistance units all over the world. The problem is that a pistol is loud, and a single shot pistol is only good, for what it was described as, is that you would find an isolated soldier and you would shoot him with this thing, and then you would take his weapons and equipment. Right? Sounds good, but the problem is, a 45 is not quiet. And you only have one shot. And so the idea is like, there was a program in the 1960s, and supposedly there's a book out there that was, I want to say it was a program. It might have been associated with Rand. It was some sort of a program that I read about online, and I haven't been able to find stuff about it. I look for it every once in a while, but there's this book called Guns in a Hurry, theoretically, and it was this internal document for some program that was done where they basically said, in the 60s, what is a insurgency or counterinsurgency weapon that we could make that's incredibly cheap, that's much better than these things. Like sometimes you'll see it on these types of things in like gun websites. Like there was a 4-shot shotgun that used 4 barrels, and it was like dirt cheap to make. And then there's like really improvised stuff. Well, all that stuff sucks. So the concept of the modern liberator is, what is a standard issue weapon that you could develop for a resistance organization, a theoretical resistance organization, probably in Europe, that would be the best bang for the buck in every way possible. And so the parameters are, it has to use 9x19 millimeter ammunition, which is the world standard full caliber ammunition. You want it to be reliable. You want to have a magazine capacity appropriate for a fighting weapon. So like a double stack 9 millimeter, let's say 15 rounds is pretty much like the basic standard. Um, it must be capable of accepting and reliably operating with suppressors of varying sizes, weights, and sophistication. So if you think about when Joe Shea was coming up with this idea, like in the 90s and in the 80s, until the 80s and into the 90s, suppressors were much less sophisticated than they are now. A lot of advances were made, and I talk about this in that article, the Guns of Faction Part 1, Beretta Urban Plinker, that suppressors with like the Nielsen device, which is the that like spring and piston that provides the compensation to basically the shot discharge that allows like a conventional Browning recoil operating system to function with a suppressor that weighs more than just a handful of ounces attached to it, that operating system is finicky. And that Nielsen device was invented in like the mid 80s, and like it wasn't even a thing on the commercial market until well into the 90s. There might be some exceptions, let's not worry about that. But basically, it didn't become common until later in the 90s. Before that, people had to make like elaborate modifications to these pistols, and the suppressors were huge. The baffle design advanced by leaps and bounds. Before that, people would, basically like the CIA issued a very small suppressor that used wipes. It used like 4 or 5 wipes, which is a rubber or polyurethane in current times uh, disc that is cut with like a cross on it. And the idea is you shoot the bullet through it, and it essentially seals up and traps the gases. This limits you with like projectile type to a certain degree, but it's very, very, very quiet. It also increases the back pressure on the weapon, which makes it operate a little better. It throws a lot more impetus into the slide. Um, and so it was like the way that people did it. There were other more primitive ways that people did these things. But this is a very simple design, and it works really well. And so, Joe Shea, this is his thinking of like, this is a cheap, functional way to do it. But being a professional from that era, he doesn't trust this Browning tilting lock barrel system, and he favors the Walther locking block design, as we see in the German P38, the Beretta 1951, the Beretta 92. uh, these you can look at pictures from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s and see like rather gargantuan cans on these guns, and they work fine with them. Like there's all these pictures in my article of a German there's a German P38 with just a gargantuan suppressor on it that ran perfectly fine, because this is a really robust mechanism for dealing with the weight of, thank you sir, the weight of the suppressor, because at the time it was like the simple design, and so efficiency was driven by like volume and number of baffles, and that means this big giant suppressor. Well, we have much more advanced technology now, and so they can be much smaller. But the idea is that you don't know what all the different resistance organizations are going to have access to. So you want the most robust operating system possible. That way the cans are incredibly simple and inexpensive. You don't have to like recreate the Nielsen device and be manufacturing Nielsen devices, for your organization, because that's machine time. And it's a very distinct item that you're making. You can have very simple suppressors without them. So there's like no benefit other than just the availability of that weapon type. But if you're building a special purpose made weapon that's going to be manufactured specifically either to be distributed by these organizations or manufactured by these organizations, why not go with an operating system that negates the need for that? So basically, what we're talking about is, in faction, they essentially they're using Beretta 92s and Beretta Model 81s, or excuse me, 82s and 32 ACP um, as these assassination weapons, but it's the 92 is your full capacity, full caliber. Yes, 9mm full caliber. Deal with it. Weapons, because you can actually get in a fight with these, right? It's appropriate as a defensive weapon, and like for an assassination. Um, the the problem with these, the limitations of the handgun, however, which is where the modern Liberator comes in, is that, yes, you can learn to shoot at longer distance. That takes, some amount of skill and confidence. You have training limitations. Like the idea is this is a resistance movement. Like you're not necessarily going to have a ton of training, or it's not necessarily going to be super safe to do a ton of training. The suppressors help to be able to like shoot in more places than if you didn't have them. But the idea is that like taking longer shots is much easier and more repeatable, like if you have a simple stock. So it isn't that you're using a full stocked rifle. It's that we see this with chassis pistol chassis that have like a folding brace, or if someone SBRs a weapon, like there's that PDW concept, like B&T has that USW um, concept that is pretty much spot on for this concept, except it uses a Browning operating system. So in the modern Liberator, it would be more like of a Beretta style thing, although all you really need is that operating mechanism. You can move in a different slide direction. Yes, thank you. The idea is that by having that very simple light stock as an option, or you have a modular weapon that has a version that's pistol only, and then you essentially can, like, let's say like with 3D printing now, have you guys seen the 3D printed like chassis type weapons? Like there's some very slick stuff that people are doing with those. You could basically drop the fire controls into that kind of a system, so that some people have these and others have just it as a straight pistol, which is nice and compact, right? It's easier to carry. um, Whether you have a red dot or not. Like the idea would be that this is something that's much easier for you to engage at slightly higher ranges if you have to, like from an extraction perspective, not like as a primary assault weapon or anything like that. But it gives you options. It gives you the ability to make, fairly accurate shots out to like 150 yards, which is stretching it. I agree, but it does give you the option. Like I was shooting pistols at 100 yards with a friend of mine recently, and we were shooting at a human silhouette that was about 6 inches wide and 18 inches high, and we were hitting it, braced from a rest, like pretty. It's not too hard. It's you just have to take your time and focus on your trigger pull. Well, with the stock, that's super easy. Like with a rifle, that's super easy. um, with a 9 millimeter with a stock, it's like ultra easy. Final concept, and this is, I think, less critical, but just an interesting idea. Because and this gets into gun spurgery. If you're aware of like the Beretta M93R, which is a machine pistol, well, it had a 3-round burst, and it had a folding stock that could be attached. There's the HK VP70, which had this big plastic. Like the idea was that it was this mass issue weapon, like if the Russians invaded Germany, that they could pass out. And so you have a pistol, a 9 millimeter pistol, and then you mount this stock, which is also like the holster slash storage box. But there's also a mechanism in it, because the slide interfaces with the stock, that allows you to switch between single shot and doing a 2-round burst. And it's like an incredibly high rate of fire. It's like 1,800 rounds per minute or 2,100 rounds per minute off the top of my head in the VP70. Yeah, there we go. 93R. That it gives the idea is that these rapid like 2-shot hits that can only do 2-round bursts when you have the stock mounted, because we're not scholars. The idea is to have it increase your hit capabilities, by having a 2-round burst when the stock is extended, because of a mechanism where the slide interfaces, and the sear interfaces with a stock that's like more in line with the upper part of the mechanism. So that's the idea that Joe Shea has, and I think it's a really sound concept, and it's totally doable. And I'm just throwing this out there, so when I publish my article, I'll have examples of basically like 3D printed PDWs that use like a uh, Glock fire controls and mechanisms, but there's also people have done the Beretta 92 and the Taurus 92. Uh, there's STL files out there for the lower receivers. So I will be dabbling with this for people who can do this. And the first round will probably be a brace mechanism. But the idea is that, you can have a really simple can that you can form one. Let's say if we're in America and we're doing everything legally, you can form one, a simple can that'll run great on an inexpensive parts set, and you can make decent hits at range with it because of the folding stock capability. And that 2 round burst is this theoretical thing that's out there for this resistance organization. So anyway, hooray!
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept. I was talking with some guys the other day, sort of along the same lines with particularly with the like the BNT um concept about
Yeah.
sort of like a slightly more built up rig specifically for church security rather than
Mm,
just a handgun, because it's sort of impractical to even have like a little short barreled I don't know, 300 blackout or whatever, but something like that built up B&T semi-stocked pistol would be an
yeah.
interesting thing to look at.
Pull up the B&T USW um, as an example, maybe, so people can visualize this. Because I think that's like the sweet spot, the non-chassis one, but the one that's fully integrated. If you can find that, that'd be awesome.
What was it? The BNT SW?
USW.
USW. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's like universal security weapon or something like that. Yeah, there we go. And so if you can click on maybe the top left picture, so that we can see it better, it's just a pistol that has a little extra chunk at the back end of it. Yeah, the A1 at the far right side. Um, the the idea here is that it's a it's just slightly larger than a conventional pistol, and it has that folding stock capability, and it has that fixed optic. Like if you know, ideally you would have a red dot, a quality optic. Thank you, sir. Um, but this shows you what we're talking about. Like the same people can manufacture a just straight pistol version that uses, I mean, what? It's really probably like 70 to 80% of the parts are going to be the same when you get down to it. You would just have a version that would have this folding stock. And again, theoretically, if the stock is extended, you could have a switch that would enable you to do like a 2 round burst. Because if anyone, I mean, we've all seen those Glock switch videos. Like these little light pistols, like if they're on full auto, they have an incredibly high rate of fire. Um, After the second round, they're just going into the sky or like a child in a housing project. And we don't want that. The idea would be that if you do a 2 round burst, you have a better chance of hitting someone at range, like reasonable range, like 50 to 100 yards, hitting the target that you're shooting at without wasting ammo or, rounds sailing off into the distance.
All right. Well, that's brilliant. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to what you have to write about that.